Welcome back, one and all. This was not intended to be a two-part episode, but that's just the way it worked out. It got way too long. So welcome to part 2 of Weightless Fishing. Okay, fishing fanatics, let's get into this a little bit. This is not a tremendously complicated thing. I'm going to show you a few different ways to rig weightless baits, different hooks you can use, that kind of stuff. So let's just start out with the bog standard basic, and the one which is probably gets more play than anything else, and that is the wacky rig, which is a weightless technique. So you have some kind of a tube or a wacky tool, they call it, that looks like this. Take the O-ring, go over the wacky tool to the end. This is mainly for Senko baits, but you could use it on other worms as well. Put this Senko into the tube, pop the O-ring off. You want to get it just on that side of the egg sac. Then you would take your hook, whatever your hook of choice is for wacky fishing, and pop it just under the O-ring like that. Now guys, there are many different types of O-rings and hooks and paraphernalia that you can use for wacky rigging, and then sinkers that you can put in, which changes it to a Nico rig, blah blah blah. It just carries on and on and on. But a bog standard wacky rig, that is how it is set up. Good. Moving on. Now for me, the bog standard rig for weightless fishing would be an extra wide gap hook. In this case, this is not a Gamakatsu. This is a VMC. And I like, for both Senkos and Super Flukes, I like a 3/0 hook. Sometimes it's more appropriate to use a 4/0 hook in the Super Fluke. You can decide what suits you best. And guys, all of these baits are ones that I've made. Go through the nose. I like to come all the way through to where the belly slit is. Twist it. Bear in mind that the line would be tied to that. Out through the back. And then just peg it like that. So that's the one. Another way that you can do it is to use a screw lock. Be a little bit careful about how you do this. Try and center it in the nose of the bait. And you just slowly wind the spring in, all the way in. Then you want to make sure when you stop winding that the eye of your spring is flat. Mark it with your thumb. Pop it through the center. And strap it. Oh, I'm really sucking today. Wind the spring all the way in. Mark it with your thumb. Pop it through and trap it. So the choices of hook are really up to you guys. It's whatever you are comfortable with. I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks that I've used throughout the years. Things that you have made, just little tricks. Things that make it a little bit more fun. The first one, normal 5-inch Senko. You could use a 4-inch Senko for this. I just nip off the very end of the tail. Then I have these, which I make myself. It's essentially a tiny little blade of your choice, split ring, crane or rolling swivel, and a spring. Center it in the back of the Senko and just twist it on. And what that does is, anytime you pop that Senko, it just gives a little flash with a little blade on the tail. And it works pretty well. Another one. Same deal again. Blade of your choice, tiny split ring, rolling swivel. Thread it over the point of the hook. Then I just use one of these little silicone balls that we've used previously. Pop that over the eye of the hook. You could also use a bobber stop to do this. And when you pop that fluke, that little blade just brr, brr. And all that does is that stops that from coming off the hook. If you use a bobber stop, you can actually locate it exactly where you want it on the hook. For example, if you wanted to keep it right up there by the head of the bait, push the little bobber stop all the way up. It'll stop that swivel and blade from sliding down the hook. I like it like that just so it's got more movement. But if that's the way you would want to do it with the bobber stop, absolutely you can do it. Also, what it does is it stops the hook, helps to stop the hook coming out of the plastic or pulling through when you set the hook. Those are just my little tricks, guys. It's not any super ninja stuff by any stretch of the imagination. It's just little tricks that I use to have more fun when I'm fishing weightless. I am very loath to take out the map to show areas where I would fish weightless, because I fish weightless everywhere. I generally don't fish weightless deeper than 15 foot. So let us say for this video, from 15 foot to 0 foot would be where I would fish. And if you fish like this, with it completely exposed, where the hook is pinned back into the bait, you could throw that in just about anything. It would very little chance of it getting stuck. The wacky rig, you've got to be a little bit more careful where you throw it, because obviously the hook is exposed. You do get weedless wacky hooks, and there are some very good ones. But I would be a little bit more careful about where I threw a wacky rig. But as long as you're fishing your weightless bait exposed like that, or skin hooked, I like to call it, you can pretty much throw it anywhere you like. It's the most weedless presentation just about that you can get. So it doesn't really get much more weedless than that. And also, with there not being any weight on the bait, it's not pulling it into the cover or structure. So this is going to be the first video where I don't pull out the map. I've just decided I am not pulling out the map. You can fish a weightless bait wherever you want to fish it. Are there better areas to fish them? Absolutely there are. Around timber and around docks and visible rocks and that type of thing are prime areas to fish weightless baits. You can fish them anywhere. small detail on when you are doing color selection, or a couple of things. First one, be aware of what the colors are or what type of bait fish exist in the body of water that you choose to fish. That is important in helping you decide, particularly in lakes with clear water, that is important in helping you decide what color soft plastic baits you want to buy. It is not as important where the water is stained to dirty. Where the water is stained to dirty, you would go with a darker color like a black or a June bug, and then you could use something like this little tail spinner guy that I made here, just to help attract more attention to the bait in that dirtier water. Because this is such a slow presentation, this particular technique is probably one of the more important techniques when it comes to color selection. So if you just want to go out and buy some soft plastic to use for weightless fishing, initially I would say go with natural colors, something like green pumpkin or watermelon based, until you have discovered what is going on in your particular home lake. And then you can either buy or make colors that are going to get you as close to that as possible. And you will find that very quickly that you have favorite colors. If all else fails, throw black. Not enough people throw black. And black, I throw black in clear and dirty water. It doesn't matter to me. I throw black a lot of the time. I will not make a batch of baits without taking everything that's left over once I've made a batch of baits, putting black dye in it, and all of those scraps I have left over I make into black baits, because I throw black all the time, and I do it because it works. Guys, I think that's going to do it for the close-ups. I know that they may seem a little bit vague, but there is most of weightless fishing, you have to work it out for yourself. A lot of people don't fish weightless because it's too slow, and for me, that's the attraction. You'll see guys going down the bank at 1,000 miles an hour, throwing spinnerbaits, throwing crankbaits, throwing jerkbaits, and you can actually come in behind those guys with a weightless presentation and literally clean up. I won't say that it happens every time, but it does happen a lot of the time. Let's head back to the main camera. What about time of year? Well, like I said in the intro of this video, I don't think that time of year is a factor. I don't think that weather is really a factor. I don't think time of year is a factor. And I think that people say that those are factors are people that don't throw weightless baits enough. That's my honest opinion. Take it or leave it. I will say that after extended periods of cold, in other words, right at the beginning of the spring or at the end of the fall when the water gets really cold, or if you're blessed enough to be able to fish into the winter, this is a lethal technique, cold water technique. Absolutely lethal. And I think in my mind, particularly when I'm throwing a fluke style bait, I'm imagining a small bait fish dying or struggling because the water's so cold, or whatever the case might be. That's how I see it in my own mind. So time of year, weather, to me, the only thing that really, weather-wise, that really affects fishing weightless is wind. It is incredibly difficult to feel the bait down when you're fishing weightless, when you've got wind blowing a bow in your line. Even with a $700 rod, it is very, very difficult. And then you would go to something like maybe put a small bullet sinker in front of the bait or whatever the case might be. We're not talking about that today. But the wind is not your friend when it comes to weightless fishing. Not at all. It makes it, you miss a lot of bites in the wind if you fish weightless. So then maybe it's time to look at something else. But what about the retrieve? Or the lack thereof. I think this is another one of those things where you kind of got to find your own path. But fishing weightless is kind of a, and I hate this expression, do nothing type of fishing. Fire it out and let it. That's why I recommend the two baits that I've recommended, the soft jerk bait and the Senko or soft stick bait, because they kind of find their own way down. And there's been a slew of baits that have been made for fishing weightless that have got ribs on them that hold air and whatever the case might be. And whatever one you find that is your favorite, that's the one you're going to throw. The little gill type lures made by G-Crack, all that kind of stuff, it's all fine. The important thing with weightless fishing is that you give the bait time to sink. So for example, a Senko will fall twice as fast as a Zoom Super Fluke will, because of the volume of salt that's in the bait. Other than a pitching scenario, I don't know why people fish a Senko any other way other than weightless. It makes no sense to me. Absolutely none. That bait, when it's on a weightless, just on a hook like that on light line, as it's sinking, it's shimmying like this. The same with the Super Fluke, but it does it slower. When the bait hits the bottom, pop it up. If you see fish that are mid-water and you are maybe watching them on your forward-facing sonar and you're fishing weightless and you let it sink through the fish, and as it gets to the fish, if there's no interest, just little pops of your rod tip like that. If you're fishing with a heavy bait, like an original Yamamoto Senko, you can pitch it weightless under docks or under trees or next to logs or in holes in the weed. It's endless, absolutely endless. But to me, the most effective way to fish a weightless bait of any kind, you must have some depth of water to allow that bait to sink and to get its little shimmy going, because that is the attraction to the fish. Can you fish them in shallow water? Absolutely you can. I have caught huge fish out of a foot and less of water on 5-inch Senkos. Huge, truly huge fish. I've also caught fish out of 15 foot of water on a weightless 5-inch Senko and a weightless Zoom Super Fluke, before I started making my own stuff. It's a more, and it always makes Brother Fran laugh when I say this, it's more about belief. And with people that don't understand fishing weightless bait, when you try and explain it to them, their eyes all glaze over. It must be so boring. It's so slow. 15,000 excuses until they do it and they get that first bite, and then the lights go on and then they understand, and they get the second bite and they understand a little bit more. And by the time they've gone down a bank and caught 10 fish where they fished previously and got one, the lights are burning bright and it kindles the fire. And it's happened with many people that I've fished with. Nick Vincent, I'm talking specifically to you. You refuse to learn how to fish a 5-inch Senko. You really need to do it, my brother. You really need to do it. What about the bite? Two very distinct types of bites when you fish weightless. There's that, I'm going to take the rod away from you, and there's that one where you just, as it's sinking, you may pick up the rod and you just see your line moving. There's no bite. You don't even feel a tick. All you see is your line moving off. And with both bites, regardless of what you're fishing, you wind down, lift slightly, you feel any weight at all, any movement, any weight, anything. Full send. Give it steel. Most of the baits that we fish weightless are thicker plastic. Super Flukes and the Senko type baits are thicker plastic, and you need to get the hook through. So regardless of what hook brand you use, you need to give it some and pin them. And obviously remember, most of the time you're fishing with lighter line, so don't horse them. And that's why I said if you've got the guts for it, because a lot of the time you're going to be fishing around cover and structure. So when you buy your line or your leader, if you're using a spinning rod, again, max your budget for your fluorocarbon. Weightless fishing is like a system. Every single thing is important. The best rod you can afford, the best fluorocarbon you can afford, the best hooks you can afford. And then a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, the baits that are the best baits for weightless fishing, or the baits that have got the most salt in them, are fairly expensive. And I'm not going to name names, you guys know who I'm talking about. You can argue all you want about they only last for one fish, blah blah blah. They are the best bait for the job. Of course, if you bought some Exile soft plastic baits, you would have the second best bait for the job, but those ones are the best bait for the job. I hope that this all makes sense to you guys. I hope that this is something that you're going to go out and try. Those of you that wanted to know about the molds there, we've done it now. You ask, I deliver. And I hope you'll join us next week for another episode of Bass Fishing Basics Tackle and Techniques series at this point in time. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.